Good morning, everybody, for the second or third or fourth time. Glad that you've been able to join. I hope you're having a great day and that you're not too disappointed that it's not raining, or that you are very happy that it isn't raining. I am of the variety that likes a little bit of moisture, but I don't think any more is to come today. Okay. Before I start on this slide, I have some details to give you. Currently, UCT has 512 rated researchers, which is 12% of the national total. We are second behind Pretoria with 564. We have 34 A-rated researchers, that is 27% of the whole, and we are far ahead of WITS, who's second with 18%. We have 6 of 19 P-rated, which is 32%, so we are well ahead there. And overall, we have 155 B-rated, 242 C-rated, and 74 Y-rated researchers. Very fine numbers. So congratulations for those of you who are already rated and are seeking a second or third or fourth round of being re-rated. And for those of you coming up first time, good luck. I'm here to help. So if there's anything that's not clear in the coming minutes, just give me a shout. Okay, what is an NRF rating? Well, first of all, let me give you some historical background. This is a system that's been running since 1984, and in the early 2000s, it was initially for science and engineering, and then it got moved to embrace social science and humanities. What is it? It is an assessment of recent research, and that refers to peer-reviewed outputs. So 8 years is the span for any rating application. 8 years. So between 2013 and 2020, any publications falling in that period, you can present in your application as part of your recent research track record. The numbers do count, in other words, quantity counts, but quality counts as well. I'm currently experiencing some competition from a saw next door. I hope you can still hear me. So quality is really an interesting, I don't know. No, I want to, sorry. Quality, what do people mean by quality? They mean lots of different things. They mean the impact factor of the journal that your work gets published in. But oftentimes, that is not on its own a clear indicator of quality. And certainly in some disciplines and fields, impact factors are not very important. For those of you who are not in fields where impact factor is your first stop to assess quality, you would be looking at a range of other indicators to indicate quality. And these would be statements about your methodology, either by other people or yourself, statements about the range of your work, that you are, for example, coupling together two fields that are generally regarded as disparate. So there's innovation, novelty. These are all angles that speak to quality outside of the bibliometrics. And I often get this question about how do I demonstrate the quality of my research? And the short answer is you have to make an argument about the quality of your research. It's the argument. You can't just present figures and feel that these speak for themselves. Certainly they help, but oftentimes you have to make the argument. The NRF rating system is international and peer-reviewed, which is to say that your rating is dependent on what reviewers say about your application. Those reviewers will both be local, by which I mean South African, and international. And we will come later to how those reviewers are selected and what the implication of that selection has for the destiny of your application. So this is a national system of research rating that is plugged in to a global system of knowledge assessment. That's why the word international there is important. Now this is the point where, why is this not going to the next slide? Come on. Okay. Yeah?
Is the button at the bottom where you can click next? No.
I actually used this yesterday. No, I can't see a button at the bottom that says next.
Thanks. Okay, I wonder if you want me to try sharing from my side again?
Well, just hang on a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I do it over here. And now is it showing a different slide?
It is, the slides is changing.
Okay, so now I've left Teams and now I'm just looking at my PowerPoint, so I can do it this way.
Okay, can you do the
right.
presentation mode on your PowerPoint at all?
No. Yeah, sure I can. Of course I can. Okay. Yes, here we go. Okay, we sorted?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So the old reason for being NRF rated is reflected in the first bullet, but in a different way. So if you get rated, you have access to NRF funding. In the old days, it was quite generous funding, and that has been terminated, which accounts for the decline in the number of applications each year. Now, what it means when it says access to NRF funding is that there will be calls for rated researchers to apply for funding. So in a way, you have an inside track to NRF funding if you are rated. You do not, however, get anything but an initial tranche, if I'm still correct, from the NRF. Jackie, butt in, but when I last heard you, 1,000 Rand for 6 years, a once-off 30,000 Rand payment for 6 years, compared to 240,000 in the past. So it's a radical reduction, but there is still some NRF funding, direct funding for being rated, but the major access is for larger amounts through calls for rated researchers. UCT tries to top up and provide inducements for NRF rating. So the second bullet refers to some seed funding for next year that Sue Harrison just signed off. I don't have the exact figures at my fingertips now, but it's also small money for a one-off to provide some immediate access to funding for people who get rated in the current cycle. The third bullet, so NRF rating has always served as a kind of local currency of research standing. So in South Africa, if you say I am B rated or A rated or C rated or Y or P rated, it generally indicates that you have standing, and within UCT, the same applies. So in all, in some but not all faculties, having a rating or being in the process of applying for a rating is regarded as some kind of proxy for being research active and successful. I am involved every week with UCT's ad hoc promotion systems. They, as you know, are faculty specific, which leads me to say that there is still some value in an NRF rating within UCT beyond the money that the little money that you get. Institutionally, coming to the second last bullet, the numbers that I read out at the start are an indication of benchmarking, so UCT can still boast of its NRF rating achievements. There was a time when we had more rated researchers than any other institution. I think per capita, we're still probably quite far ahead of everybody else. Pretoria is a much bigger university. But nevertheless, UCT does encourage its staff to get rated because the institution benefits. And finally, being rated makes one aware of one's publication record. When I was in the research office, I used to weave in an NRF rating application with how to plan one's research and publication aspiration going forward. So if one is applying for a rating now, that's obviously your immediate focus. But if you get rated and you're 3 or 4 years into your rating cycle, and the rating cycle is 6 years, the review period is 8 years, you would be interested in calculating your chances of maintaining or improving your rating by looking at your record since your last rating and wondering what you would do and planning for improvements. That was not me at my most articulate. So if you do have any questions about that, let me know. I'm just going to the next slide now, which is this one. Go to, I'm trusting that this is a new slide. I can't see anybody, so you do just have to shout. Okay, so there are 5 rating categories. What I call the junior categories, the Y and the P. Generally, well, the P rating is 35 and younger, and the Y rating is 40 and younger. And here the focus is on movement, that you're an early or relatively early career researcher, still active, but still to establish yourself. Whereas what I call the senior categories, C, B, and A, are people who are no longer junior. Either you're older than 35 and 40 and beyond 5 years from the award of your doctorate, or you've already had a junior rating and are seeking what I call a senior rating, a C, B, or A rating, which speaks no longer of promise and what you will achieve, but what you have achieved, so that you will there be making a claim that you have arrived, and you have arrived at a particular level. I'm just now going back to the PowerPoint to move to the next slide. Okay, so now we get to the detail of what each of these letters mean. I will spend a little bit more time on this. You will see it says researchers who are unequivocally recognized by their peers as leading international scholars. So the two aspects of that definition that I want to dwell on is leading international scholar and the word unequivocally. So leading international scholar means that in your application, you have to make the argument that your work, your research outputs demonstrate that you are a world leader. And the reviewers have to use the term there, unequivocally accept the argument that you are indeed a leading international scholar. So there are two elements here which I will return to. There's you, the applicant, and the argument you are making about yourself, and the reception of that argument on the part of the reviewers. Do they agree with your argument unequivocally or not? And as I speak like this, I'm trying to myself emphasize the importance of the application and how you construct it. These seminars and workshops have always been designed to go beyond just an information dissemination moment, but to try and help people think about how they will write about themselves in the 4 narrative blocks of the application. I'll come to these again, but for now I should just highlight that they start with a personal profile, a biography, autobiography, a description of yourself, then a description of completed research, then an assessment of your own research, and then future research. Each of those is requires a narrative, and how you construct that is very important. And when you are constructing and writing that, you need to bear in mind that you are making an argument. If you are shooting for an A, the argument is that you're a leading international scholar. For B, you are wanting to argue that you enjoy considerable international recognition. And if you believe that you are an internationally recognized scholar, you need, in the process of putting your application together, to think about what evidence you will present that demonstrate that you have indeed international recognition. And again, I'm expecting questions about this, but ordinarily the kinds of evidence you would use is that you don't only publish in South African journals, you publish in international journals, your work is cited quantitatively, so your H and I index and lifetime citations are good, and that if you drill down, you can see that people all over the world are referring to your work and citing it. Another way of demonstrating international recognition. That you give keynotes, you attend. What attending conferences means these days, who knows? But in the old days, it would mean that you travel around, that you are networked globally, and that you can use all of these accomplishments to make the argument that you have considerable international recognition. Just going now to the next slide. If you will have seen that most UCT researchers are C-rated. In the old days, people would either regard this as the booby prize or something not really worth having. In fact, what I try to emphasize that when I last looked, only 25% of all South African researchers are rated. So you're in the top 25% if you have an NRF rating. That's pretty good. Secondly, to get a C, you basically have to show that you are operating independently. So established means a number of things. It means that you have a corpus of work, not just 1 or 2 articles, a body of work that testifies to your maturation, if I can put it like that, from your doctorate or your postdoctorate, that you are working independently of your PhD supervisor, that some evidence of this would be either a shift away from the immediate focus of your doctoral and postdoctoral work to a new but related area, to working with different collaborators, to publishing in a range of outlets, maybe sometimes with collaborators, both former doctoral and postdoc supervisors, but also with new people or on your own. So that here again, the argument would classically be that you have moved on, you're operating independently, you are getting research grants on your own, you're a principal investigator, you are being invited to be a participant in research projects on your own cognizances, not as the student of your doctoral supervisor, but because you've made a name for yourself in a particular area. So once again, there is some skill and some narrative dexterity required to make the argument that you are established. I think I've just gone backwards, which is never a good thing. Actually, maybe it is sometimes a good thing. Okay. So for the junior categories, I've already gone through this. 35 years of age or younger and a doctorate less than 5 years in the past, with the emphasis on becoming a future leader. So as I've said, there are only 19 P-rated researchers in the country. It's very difficult to be P-rated. And here the emphasis has to be on the quality of your recent outputs as an indicator of promise. So that, for example, your second article, you're a lead author in Nature or Science, one of the big journals, or in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, one of the big ones. And you would then weave this achievement into a narrative that made the argument that your work suggests a kind of breakthrough potential, that you are going to be a leader in the near future. Okay. Why? I'm really repeating what I've already said, because this mirrors the divide between A and B and C. Here, the potential to establish yourself. So you need publications as an indication of that potential. You're able to publish your research work. It would be, as I've already indicated, maybe branching out already from your PhD supervisor. So I think one of the questions I quite often get here is, if you've only published with a particular team and your doctoral supervisor, what does that mean for your chances of getting a Y rating? It certainly doesn't prevent you from applying, and there is no necessary hindrance in having a strong publishing record with your doctoral supervisor or her or his team. But it is not a bad idea to show that you already at this stage are demonstrating the ability to get beyond your doctoral or postdoctoral stage, so that you are beginning to spread your wings to develop your independence. Again, quite how one does that, we can discuss as we go along. I'm now getting to the point of the presentation where I talk about the processes of the NRF, and thereafter we'll talk about the application itself. But because I can't see anybody, I'm just going to pause for a bit. Jackie, can you just look, and does anybody want to ask a question now? Should I just steam ahead? I'll just wait for you to answer my question.
Rob, there's no questions in the chat box. No hands I'm monitoring. I'll interfere if there's anything
Okay.
that comes up.
Okay, good. So now we're talking about the process. So the top green box that says submission of scholarly achievements, this is your NRF application, your rating application, which you submit. That goes to a specialist committee. There are of the order of 25, I think it may be 26 or 24, but about 25 specialist committees that are appointed by the NRF. And their first job is to make a call as to whether your application is strong enough or qualifies for review. And so you will see a sideways movement to not accepted at that point. In my experience, that is a very unusual first step. I'd say 5% tops of applications get rejected at that point for a variety of reasons. So I've never paid a lot of attention to that, although it does occasionally happen that applications are regarded either as not eligible or premature, and they get bounced. But if we go from the specialist committee, their next job is the selection of 6 peer reviewers. In the old days, it was 8. So this reflects a global difficulty of reviewer fatigue. So the number has fallen to 6, but still 6 reviewers is plenty to work with. Now, it's at this point that I'll just pause for a moment to say that who is selected as a reviewer is very, very important. The process of selecting reviewers is as follows. You, the applicant, will nominate, is it 8 reviewers? From that list will be chosen by the select specialist committee 3 initially, and they will also identify, independent of your list, 3 reviewers, and emails will be sent to 6 who will be asked to review your application. Now, I want to say a couple more things. Who you nominate as reviewer is very important, exceptionally important, because you need to be assured that, excuse those who are not familiar with the great game of cricket, but you need to have some assurance that your reviewers will go into bat for you. Now, what does that mean? It means that you can be sure that they know your work, they esteem it in some way, and most importantly, that they will write the review. It doesn't help to choose the Nobel Prize winner, because she or he is probably not going to respond to an NRF request to review your application because she or he will be too busy. So I've often seen what I think are not wise choices made, where people think that if you select very well-known people in your field, that is a guarantee of a good review report. It isn't. You should be thinking rather of who will have the time and the interest to write a good review report. So think very carefully about who you nominate. Who the specialist committee nominates independently, you have no control over. And that's a bit of a lottery. They are on the committee because they should have a good knowledge of the field and hopefully make good choices of independent reviewers. The biggest difficulty they will face is people saying, no, I won't write a review. Again, you have no control over that. Reviewer fatigue is a common phenomenon, but it does underline the importance of considering who is likely to write a review report for you. So I have always given the advice, which remains somewhat contested to this day, that you should contact those people you are nominating as reviewers to give them a heads up, to give them some idea of what is required, to reassure them that they're not going to have to take a couple of days leave to do the job, and to encourage them to please respond to the NRF review request with a review report. You're not going to promise them, you know, a crate of Chivas Regal or an extra special birthday or Christmas present. You're not bribing them. You are simply priming them, giving them some warning and requesting them to assist not just you, but the whole NRF rating system. Without review reports, there will be no rating. So that's my defense against potential criticism that I'm somehow subverting the NRF rating system. I'm not. I'm actually trying to keep it working. Okay. So once the emails have gone out requesting reviewer reports, these reports are collected. Normally 6, that is the target, sometimes fewer if you get a lot of rejections, people refusing to write review reports. These reports, however many, are gathered together and considered at a joint meeting by the specialist committee, by an assessor whose job it is to standardize assessments across the various specialist committees. So you can't have one very generous specialist committee and one very mean specialist committee. The assessor's job is to try and ensure some kind of uniformity. At any rate, you get this gathering. It used to be in Pretoria face-to-face. Now I suspect it's virtual, where there is an assessor, one person, a specialist committee, generally 3 or 4 people, but in some cases up to 6, depending on how broad the specialization is. And they come together in a meeting with a chair, who's generally somebody who understands the NRF rating process well. And they go through each reviewer report. The reviewer reports are graded. Let me see if I'm jumping ahead. Change the slide. Okay. We're now in the joint meeting.
So there's a question that someone would like to know if the peer review should be only based in South Africa.
A good question, thank you. In a way, it's determined by what you're going for. So it's difficult to give an unambiguous answer. If you're going for a C rating and your area of research is quite South African specific, so say for example you're into isiXhosa linguistics, it's likely that most of your peers will be in South Africa. There may be linguists elsewhere who are studying the Bantu languages and may be appropriate. But I'm trying to say that there are some fields and areas of research that may have a particular South African spread, where you would be justified in choosing only or mainly South African reviewers. I would say ordinarily it would be better to have a mix. If you're going for a C rating, an established researcher, you don't really need international reviewers to testify that you're established, but I would say it's desirable. So this is a kind of a strategic choice on your part. I would say it's better, as a general rule, to have a mix of local and international. But it depends on your circumstance. There's some subjects where, in fact, often all the reviewers are international. So you get, both sides of the seesaw. Generally, I would go for a mix. Unless I hear further questions, I'm now going to talk about the slide in front of me.
You can carry on, Rob.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.
So when when the committee meets at this joint meeting, the first thing they decide is on the value of the review report. The value means, is it usable or not? You give a 1, 2, 3 assessment. 1 is excellent report, 2 is a usable report, 3 is an unusable report. It is discarded. An unusable report will either show naked prejudice or 2, show a lack of familiarity with your work, i.e. doesn't appear as though the applicant has actually read your work, or a total lack of familiarity with the field. So there are a number of bases to award a review report a 3. Often brevity, like 3 lines. So I've seen reviewers write, this applicant's work is excellent, world leading, full stop. I fully endorse. Well, you can't do anything with that report. So those are the grounds for awarding a 3, but most reports get a 1 or a 2, and then the reports collectively are discussed. And as you'll see, either the committee agrees and you reach consensus, or there is no consensus. If there's no consensus, disagreement, strong disagreement, generally what happens is the assessor takes position A and the specialist committee takes position B. Neither are prepared to budge. They refuse to agree, and then it goes into another loop to the executive evaluation committee. That happens, I would say, 10% of the time. But let's stick with the consensus where there's agreement, and the agreement is that the person is a B, a C, or a Y, and there's agreement that it should be an A or a P, world leading, either established or in future. If it's an A or a P, it goes back for ratification by the Executive Evaluation Committee. So I can add more detail to all of these, but for now, let me steam forward. So if you're a B, C, or Y, you tend to get the letter from the NRF earlier than people who are either in the no consensus box or the A or P recommendation box. There is an unfortunate further category of consensus, which is RU, rating unsuccessful, where you also can get an early confirmation from the NRF. Now, if you the Executive Evaluation Committee will then ratify the A or a P or not. It goes back, as you can see by that yellow arrow, back to the NRF, and they will inform you accordingly. And similarly, the no consensus cases are then executively decided, and one gets the information through a letter. These letters can take a long time in coming, is all I can say. Yeah, so over many years, I've often got emails saying, what's happening? Why haven't I heard anything? And it's either because the specialist committee was scheduled to meet late in the year, or because they couldn't get enough review reports for your particular application and they've had to go and search for more, or because the Secretariat is working very slowly at the NRF. It's a combination of those 3. Then there's an appeal. You don't like the news, you can object. There is an appeal process that then goes to a separate committee, the appeals committee. So this is a very rigorous process. There are lots of checks and balances. I always defend the NRF process as being fair, procedurally fair, even if it doesn't always produce what I think is a very just outcome. Okay, we are making progress. I've already mentioned some of these tasks, but I will go through them formally again. So selecting reviewers, I've already indicated what the specialist committee has to do there. By the way, the NRF has a big spreadsheet of people who've reviewed and their areas of expertise, and specialist committees can and are encouraged to use that spreadsheet to choose independent reviewers. So, but you can also go and use Google Scholar or ask colleagues for people if you yourself don't feel competent to make a pronouncement about who would be a peer. Now, when I say that, I should maybe address the question of who is a peer. So a peer is generally not your supervisor, either at master's or doctoral level. There's a hierarchical relationship there. They are not regarded as your peers, nor are your own students regarded as your peers. I mean, the one exception would be if you are no longer young and you've been around for a long time. You may have had a student 20 years ago who is now, a world leader, and then you could certainly make the case that that would be a peer. But, I'm really talking the exception there. So to repeat, generally a peer is not your former student nor your supervisor. Peers, generally, my advice would be if you work in teams, one collaborator. Collaborators are peers, but there's sometimes some objection from identifying a collaborator, more than one collaborator as a peer in your list of nominated reviewers. I encourage you to select at least one collaborator. And in some fields, it's almost impossible not to identify collaborators because there's so much teamwork. So collaborators are peers, people basically working in your field who know your work, broadly speaking, are peers. I've spoken about the rating of the quality of the reports. Deciding the rating value of each reviewer report. I want to say a little bit more about this. Generally speaking, a reviewer will write, if it's a good review report, it is asked to make an assessment of your strengths and your weaknesses. So a good review report will not be like a testimonial, only focusing on the good and not mentioning any weakness. A good review report will mention strengths and weaknesses. And where this is a challenge for a specialist committee, it is to make an overall assessment of how to balance the strength and the weakness in a particular reviewer report. So let us imagine that a reviewer says that this person's work is receiving international recognition. She or he has started collaborating with the University of California, San Diego. They've published some articles, but these articles don't appear to have much traction yet. They don't have many citations. The researchers' work has a lot of take-up in the national context. Now, the specialist review committee now has to decide, is this a B report showing international recognition, or is it a C report indicating established researcher? Now, in the way that I've tried to describe, I'm trying to indicate that there are both elements in a review report of B and C. So you could, if in a specialist committee, rate that as a B/C report. It's got a bit of both. And in fact, this is often what happens. And it happens for between A and B, B and C and rating unsuccessful. Let's give an example of rating unsuccessful. This is a person who still is mainly dependent on collaboration with the doctoral supervisor. There is some indication of new collaboration, but thus far only one research publication has resulted from these new collaborations. Here, the specialist committee has evidence of research productivity, but still of some dependence on the doctoral supervisor that may indicate that she or he is not yet established. So here, this may be a C/rating unsuccessful review report. Now, once you've gone through each of the review reports, you put them all together, and you have two choices of approach. Either you do it arithmetically, you say, well, there are 3 C reports, 2 BC reports, and 1 B report. The C reports are in the majority. We would call this person a C1, which is to say that the person is an established researcher with some evidence, but a minority opinion of international recognition. That would be a C1. Another way of approaching this situation would be to say, we're not going to go the arithmetical route. We're going to look at this holistically. And you could then come up with a B3 saying, yeah, but the best reviewer reports, the one that we gave a 1 to, excellent report, who's well known in the field, is esteemed, has pointed out certain strengths that incline us to give this candidate a B3. So you will see that there is a lot of room for debate in assessing a rating, and this debate occurs when the assessor and the specialist committee come together. The final task, going down to identifying feedback, the feedback is very patchy. Feedback is designed to help you, A, make sense of the rating that you got, and B, to help you planning into the future. It has always been a big ask of reviewers to identify feedback, particularly in these difficult cases where reviewers are not of one mind. And so increasingly this is outsourced to retired academics who, some of them do an excellent job, and they go through the review reports and they extract really helpful stuff, and others don't do such an excellent job. So in the end, the NRF will advise you, and you will get 2 letters, an initial letter that indicates what your rating is and how many reviewers were approached, how many responded, how many were international, and how many were local. That's the first and earliest statement you get from the NRF. And later, you will get feedback, which hopefully will be of some assistance to you in making sense of what the outcome of your application was. And it is on receipt of the second letter that you are invited to appeal if you are dissatisfied. Right. Jackie, still all good?
Still no questions, Rob?
Gee, I'm good today. I'm answering everything in advance. Okay. All right. I think we've gone through most of these. To nominate your own reviewers, very important task, not to be taken lightly. If for newbies, I would suggest going to people who you know who are rated and maybe just talking this through with them to get their advice. The second bullet, who you should not approach, my standard advice is don't fill that in. Although I do know that particularly with regard to patents, in particular fields, there is competition which actually does prevent rivals saying anything nice about you. So I have seen compelling reasons given for not approaching reviewers. And there sometimes there's bad blood that can be a good reason for indicating you don't want people to be approached. I would say two final things, however, that on one occasion, the NRF, they're not obliged to take this seriously. They sent out a review request to a person who a candidate said should not be approached, and the case came to the appeal committee, and I was on the appeal committee. And in fact, this person who the candidate said should not be approached wrote by far the best and the most positive review report received. So I think sometimes people imagine that there are bogeys out there and there are people going for them, and it's not true. The other anecdote I like telling was we once had an applicant writing that nobody from the United States should be approached because none of them would be able to make an assessment, which is really a very unhelpful stipulation. It will be ignored, but I think it reflects very badly on the applicant when they make this kind of request. So I tend to urge caution on that count of trying to exclude people. I've already spoken about the mix of national and international. Ideological differences, this comes up very occasionally. It is sometimes relevant. I've seen also issues raised by qualitative researchers who believe, and sometimes correctly, that people who only do quantitative research are not going to look at their work with much understanding. So, again, I would caution against excluding people. And this goes back to the kind of narrative you write, that in your narrative you have the chance to explain what you're doing. And I think that's the place where you should focus your energies. Okay. So now, let me this again. So this is normally the place in a presentation where I do get a lot of questions. So please do feel free to talk about any of these items. They are very important. So a reviewer is instructed to look at the quality, impact, and coherence of your research outputs. I'm going to start with coherence because it's very important. For those people with a clear focus in their work, it's not a challenge at all. But increasingly in the world of interdisciplinary and team research, it is something that needs to be paid attention in your narrative. So what does coherence mean? It means that you are working in an area of research where a reviewer can see connections, can join the dots. If you imagine that there are many scattered dots, it is up to you in your narrative, to explain how these dots can be and are joined. And this can often be done by having a master question. You say, I am interested in issues of methodology, and I have pursued my interest in methodology in the following ways. So you have a kind of a blanket statement or a blanket question that you then locate all the subdivisions or the constituent parts of your research work under that blanket. Now, often at this case, because it's just easiest to say that as a historian trained in kind of rural history, I always had a very big problem with coherence in my own rating applications, because I moved from history, South African rural history, to South African education, to gender and education, and then to the sociology of masculinity. And although I can and do trace a line and a connection between each of those jumps, some of the jumps were so big that they would actually undermine an application of mine if I were to try and join all of the dots. So I've often strategically emphasized certain parts of my work to show its coherence. And often a rating application requires that of an applicant, to stand back and look at what you've done in the last 8 years and to select what's the most important part. And if there is some space between some of those publications, consciously and specifically to explain why there is that space, but also to argue that the space is inconsequential insofar as coherence is concerned. Now let me talk about standing. So for me, standing invites one to talk, to insert into the application proxies that suggest that you have arrived. So things that you would use here is, are you asked to review for journals, to be on editorial boards? Are you invited to examine postgraduate theses? Are you invited to give plenary talks, keynotes? Are you invited to be part of research teams? Are you invited to review other people's work for funding agencies? All of these invitations can be made in an argument to indicate standing, that people recognize you as somebody who has arrived, who has an expert opinion. And it's important to assemble this evidence as a complement to your bibliometrical and other evidence that you will use to show the impact and quality. So standing is a really important part, especially for the third block narrative, that is the assessment of your own research. So there, it's in that block that you should showcase these estimations of your standing as evidence to support your argument. Impact is most easily measured bibliometrically. Many of you, I'm sure, will know Google Scholar, ISI, Scopus. All of these harvesting instruments provide you with evidence of the impact of your work. So the primary ones are citations, lifetime citations, H-index and I-10. If you've got good figures, use them. If you don't have good figures, you can be imaginative. You can look at the number of downloads. I've seen people cite tweets. There are a variety of bibliometric measures that are beyond citations and can be used, and you should use them if you think that they speak to how your work is being disseminated and received. So there are, a great many ways of demonstrating bibliometrically the impact of your work. But there are also other qualitative ways of doing this. So you can, for example, go to the leader in your field, and if she or he not just cites, but uses your work more than just a citation, you are able to go to the most cited article in your field in the last 10 years, and there you'll find glowing tribute to your work, to the influence of your work, to the novelty of your work. If you don't have good bibliometrics, this is a good thing to draw to the reviewer's attention, that the numbers can conceal stuff that shows impact. That also shows quality, that there's something particular about how you have gone about your work that has impressed other researchers in your field. I've already spoken about quality, and I'm happy to say more about quality. But these 4 items are the things that you should have in mind when you are writing your narratives. They are absolutely central.
Rob, there's no questions, but I'm just alerting you that we have about 5 minutes.
Okay, now what happened there? I still want to go. Okay. Are you still looking at my screen? Okay. 5 minutes, okay. If there are no questions, we've talked about most of this already, but I want to come to the 5 best recent research outputs.
Sorry, Rob, there's a hand up.
Yes, I'm listening.
Monique Williams, would you like to unpause and ask a question?
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. Sorry, there's quite a lot of background noise. So you may still be getting there, but so when I look at the narrative blocks and this section about the best research outputs, at first glance, I'm rating for the first time, or going to be applying to rate for the first time. There seems to be a lot of repetition when you look at it. So if I look at completed research as well as best research outputs and self-assessment of research. So maybe could you perhaps touch on how those things differ from each other, and if the focus should be slightly different when you answer those different sections? Not sure if that's clear.
That's an excellent question. Thank you very much. And it comes at exactly the right time. Jackie, I can go beyond 11:15, if people want to. I'm sorry I've been such a windbag. Monique, let us start with the 5 best recent research outputs. So this is a absolutely critical question. So the reviewer has to tick a box that says, I have read the best 5 recent research outputs, which you choose and you upload onto the NRF site. So how do you choose these 5 best research outputs? Some people don't have an obvious 5 best, but many people who've published a lot don't. And it's a strategic choice of how you choose your best 5, and it informs the argument that you will make in those 5 narrative red-colored blocks that you are looking at right now. So when you select, I would recommend that actually you start, if you're applying for the first time, by thinking about this question. And the question is, what will be the criteria that I use to choose my 5 best? Will it be the 5 that are cited the most? Will it be the 5 that are in the best journals? Will it be the 5 where I am either first or last author or sole author? Will it be 5 that speak to the coherence of my research? Will it be 5 that are spread across the 8-year review period? There are a great many considerations that come into play when you are making this choice. And it's a critical choice because it's the one time that you can insist that a reviewer reads your work. For the rest, the reviewer is under no obligation to read anything other than your application. So here's the chance for you to make a choice that informs everything else that you write. So if you choose the best 5, that choice should then feed into your biographical sketch. I am an oceanographer interested in sea corals, off the Southern African eastern coast. Now, if that's what you do, then your outputs should reflect that. It shouldn't suddenly be talking, about the geology of kimberlite and, diamonds in South Africa. I know that's a ridiculous example, but okay. So you want to cluster your best 5 and then meld it with a description of how you have become an oceanographer interested in corals. And that's a very particular story that you can tell. And it in a way, it sets the reviewer up to understand your passion, your expertise, your interest, your niche advantage right from the outset. You're going to start telling the reviewer about yourself as researcher before you come to your research outputs, but it's a story determined by your 5 best research outputs that you've already chosen. So without declaring that what your 5 best research outputs are in your biographical sketch, you're building a story that then is taken up in your description of completed research. So say you've got 15 articles and they all deal with aspects of reef formation on the southeast African coast. Not all of them are on corals, but some of them have to do with the geology on which the corals are built, etc., etc. You now describe, you do not make an evaluation in this narrative. It's a description. So you basically, I would advise the description starts with an overall statement. I'm interested in this area. I'm interested and engaged in answering this question. And I have addressed this question in a variety of ways. And then you group what your publications and describe them briefly into themes, if you like, if it fits the purpose. So there isn't actually that here. You're building an argument. This is who I am. This is the research I've done. Self-assessment. This is how good the research is. Now you come to the assessment. You're building as you go along. You're building an argument that comes to its climactic moment in the self-assessment, which says, I am an established researcher in oceanography because my work on corals of the southeast African coast is I've published 15 articles. These are in these journals with impact factor XYZ. This many citations. I'm actually a reviewer for these specialist journals in my field. I've been an examiner for oceanography departments in South Africa and elsewhere. So now you are building an argument that you have arrived. You're an established researcher. And then in your final block, and this is what I'm going to do into the future, which if you're a relatively early career researcher, shows that you're going to build and consolidate the work that you've already done. I'm editing a book, I'm going to plan a conference, and then I'm going to edit a book out of the conference proceedings. I've developed research collaboration with people in Indonesia also studying corals, and I've actually already put in a research grant to continue my work with collaborations with people in Egypt. Now you've got a story that goes continuously from the first narrative all the way through to the end that meshes with your 5 best research outputs and is complemented, if you've got a long career, by other outputs that predate 2013. I'm going to pause to see if you want to ask a follow-up question.
No, thanks. That was very helpful.
Thanks very much, Monique. Good luck. Jackie, is there anything
There's
else?
Another question, Rob.
Yeah.
Andrew Tucker, would you like to unmute and ask Rob the question?
Thank you, and thank you, Rob, for a fascinating and really informative discussion. My question is, if the most cited stuff you've done and a part of your research history which kind of sets up and tees up the stuff between the 2013-2020 period under review. How far and how much should you talk about the earlier stuff to legitimate the 5 articles which define the bulk of the assessment?
Excellent question, Andy, and hello. My big answer to your very specific question is try and use to best effect all your research outputs to strengthen your story. That would be the first. So although the review period is 2013 to 2020, if you have a career that predates that, it makes very good sense to use those research accomplishments to as part of your narrative, and you would start that in the initial biographical sketch, where you would tell the reviewer that you have this long career, in your case, Andy, somewhat interrupted and gone sideways, but you would still seek to capitalize on those early accomplishments and show the threads that join them with your later work. So in the description of completed research, although they say 2013 to 2020, I think it's totally legitimate to mention stuff from, for example, 2010, and in the process simply show the connections, which is your question, Andy, that although these 2013 and 2020 articles in the period appear to be disconnected, they are informed by earlier work. And then to do a self-citation number, to quote them, they should be in your 10 best research outputs before 2013. So those two can be threaded back into your biographical sketch and into the description of completed research. It becomes a bit more problematic if you want to put them in the self-assessment, because the self-assessment is the last 8 years. But if you want 1 or 2 sentences to say, and I think we do have some graybeards in the audience, I've been around for a long time and I've been doing this, and then mention some of the pre-2013 stuff in your self-assessment, that's also fine. But the self-assessment really should focus strongly on the 2013 to 2020 period.
Thanks, Rob. Brilliant.
Thanks, Andy. Jackie, I'm looking for guidance. We are nearly at the end of the PowerPoint, as far as I know. And I don't have a whole lot more to say. There are internal deadlines and stuff, so maybe I'll just, for the sake of it, go to the last couple of slides. People can just... so let's do this. It's often I get questions of, what are publications? Well, peer review, there are many different kinds. Patents are sometimes used. Technical reports, now these refer to only very specific disciplines, but some technical reports are peer reviewed, and you can put it in there. There are 2 kinds of problems. One is too much, and the other is too little. So if you've got too much, you don't need technical reports. But for some people, patents are a very important aspect of their research, and I've certainly seen patents put into top 5 publication lists. The other question I often get is peer-reviewed conference proceedings, very important in some engineering disciplines, but very unimportant in the humanities by and large. So it's really quite a personal choice that you have. Student outputs are important. There's a box in the form that asks you to put something there. If you've got masters and doctoral students that are publishing, that's great. Stick it in there and try and connect those achievements in your self-evaluation. So the thing is, try and join the dots as much as possible. If you've got a great postgrad student that's publishing, in your self-assessment saying, I'm also playing a mentorship role, I'm building capacity in the next generation of researchers, And that goes to the issue of standing. If you're doing that, that will raise your standing because your students are your best advertisement or amongst your best advertisements. So there are opportunities in the NRF rating form to blow your own trumpet. Yeah, this is an important one. I think many of you will have this, but I draw attention to the specifically excludes. So the routine testing and analysis of materials, components, instruments. So this means basically lab technicians cannot get a research NRF research rating. And it also means that if you're developing teaching materials that do not embody substantial original inquiry. So I'm often asked, can I put textbooks into your application? Well, you can, but you need to be mindful that then you're going to have to argue that they embody substantial original inquiry. So the definitions are important, and the specialist committee, when they evaluate, they will take that into consideration. Conversely, for people in surgery and engineering, the last bullet of research specifically includes is very important. Building on existing knowledge to produce new or substantially improved materials, devices, products, policies, or processes. So people in engineering, beg your pardon, geography, people engaged in policy making, you can see that this definition allows you to import that work and to describe it as research and to weave it into your narrative as an important part of what you have achieved as a researcher. It's very important. I'm not going to do that. This help documents, not talking about that. Jackie, did I miss the internal dates? I think I did. The 23rd of November.
Yes.
Is where was that?
Just see that. There we go.
Anyway, it's on your website.
Yes.
There we go. There we go. Yeah. Okay, folks. So I'm sure you've got nothing to do for the next three weeks. So you can meet the research office internal deadline very easily and comfortably. Sorry, Jackie. Having worked in the research office, I used to hear sighs of dismay when they looked at these dates. The research office is there to help you. The 17th of December is, Jackie, I think I'm still right in saying that if you miss that, you won't be sent to purgatory. The research office will take an understanding view that life is complicated. The final submission date on the 1st of February is much more definitive. So folks, got teaching and marking and what, you're exhausted from lockdown. I think the big message is UCT would love for you to apply for rating and will do everything it can to accommodate you and help you in applying for rating in this difficult time. I think from, yes.
There's one last question, one last hand from
sure.
Is it? Can I ask you to unmute and ask your question, Is it?
Yes, I was just want to ask, how does this internal deadline works? We apply on the NRF website and click send, and it goes direct to UCT. How? I'm not sure how does it work. If you could explain, please.
Jackie, you can explain the technicalities, but sorry, I didn't catch your name, but I think it's really important for you to work on a Word document, because that website often is not the most reliable, and I know people get in a fury if they're working online and everything just disappears. So I would strongly encourage you to work, as I say, in a Word document, and then when you're ready to paste it across. The technicality that you raise is something that Jackie can answer.
Yes, so the application is submitted online and we will directly receive the application, and from there it will go to the internal review committee.
Is that all right, Jackie? I see we're 11:30, so I do understand that people will need to leave and what. Can I close this, the PowerPoint?
Yes, Rob. I've got two questions in the chat, but that I will attend to.
Okay, well, I'm here now, so any questions?
So Anna Taylor wanted to find out, for Y ratings, do you need to be under 40 when submission goes in or when rating is completed?
Jackie, that's a technicality and it's gone always. I think don't you have to be 40 or younger on the 31st of December?
That's it.
Yes.
Yes. What is the difference between the two dates, 3rd November and 17 December? Monique, that is just a second opportunity to submit your application. If you couldn't make the first date. There's no other questions, Rob.
Okay. It's been lovely meeting you all. Thank you very much. Good luck. Good luck, Jackie. Always lovely to work with you. Yes. See you all again soon. Hopefully properly, not with mug shots and unmoving letters of the alphabet.
Thank you so much, Rob. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye.